So the big question is this. We know spontaneous remissions and so-called miracle cures exist. We also know they aren't so spontaneous after all. I'm living proof of this, having cured my quote-unquote incurable illness. There's something to how this happens. So how do we, as humans with chronic symptoms, tap into this so-called miraculous healing capacity? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers. My name is Dr. Erin Hayford, and welcome to the Sacred Illness Podcast. Before we begin today's episode, just my standard medical disclaimer. This podcast is intended for educational and informational purposes only. The content should not be considered a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always consult with a qualified healthcare professional regarding any medical concerns. Hey everyone, Dr. Erin here. Welcome to episode 40 of the Sacred Illness Podcast. I can't believe that it has been 40 episodes already. I feel like I just started this podcast a little while ago, and here we are, 40 episodes later. And for today's episode, I'm actually doing something a little different. I was a guest on a podcast recently, the MEN1 podcast with Lizzie, and I wanted to feature the podcast here as well because it was a really fun conversation. I got to share a lot of my own story, and she answered some really great, or she asked some really great questions that I got to answer and think about my own journey in a way that I don't often articulate here on the podcast because I'm focused on interviewing other people. So I'm sharing that today for episode 40. I hope you enjoy, and thank you for being here. Thanks for subscribing. Thanks for following along on this journey and the journey of those on this podcast. And I'm looking forward to 40 more plus episodes to come. All right, here we go.
Hello and welcome to a brand new episode of the MEN1 Mosaic podcast. I am so excited to have with me today Dr. Erin Hayford, who is a naturopathic doctor and somatic practitioner. Erin herself has a personal experience of illness, healing illness, coming through the stress and the trauma of that. And so I'm really excited to kind of ask her so many questions about what it is like to sit on both sides of the desk in a manner of speaking. So in the episode today, we'll be covering topics like stress, trauma, the emotional side of illness, as well as the physical, how to feel safe in your body when it feels like it's attacking you. And hopefully you'll come away with a few kind of tangible tips that can help take you to the next stage on your healing journey, whether you're here as an MEN1 patient or you're just tuning in because you're interested. So Erin, firstly, or Dr. Erin, I should say, it is so exciting to have you on. Thank you very much for giving over your time. It's really cool to have you here.
Yes, likewise. Thank you. I'm so grateful for social media for connecting us because we live in very different parts of the world, and I'm glad we could make this work and happy to talk to you today.
Likewise. I wanted to ask you a question which I myself am not totally clear on, and I'm hoping you'll be able to help me. So you're a naturopathic doctor, and yes, it's a term that I've had kind of used loosely, and I feel like maybe we don't have many in the UK, maybe there are a few more in the US, I'm not entirely sure. Can you explain to me and to listeners here, what exactly is a naturopathic doctor, and how does this differ from, let's say, conventional medicine, but also other forms of more alternative medicine that are more commonly heard, so functional medicine, integrative medicine, that kind of thing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So it depends on a few, the term is like you said, used loosely. And I think it can be used in many different ways depending on where you live. And even in the US, there's sort of disparity in terms of how the term is used from state to state. So I can speak from, in the United States, if you go to a naturopathic medical school, it's a 4-year degree, or it can be 5, depending on how long you take. It's medical school, but it's with a different lens. It's a different philosophy, a different paradigm that naturopaths are part of. So we have the same, background training in like anatomy, physiology, all the basic sciences that you need to sort of understand just how the body functions, and also how disease occurs and what's happening when disease occurs. We also have training, maybe additional training that more conventional doctors don't have in nutrition. Obviously, herbal medicine is not part of conventional training. It's part of our training. We do learn pharmaceuticals and how to prescribe and deprescribe also. So we learn essentially all the kind of basic things that a medical conventional functional doctor would. And then we have those additional modalities that we learn that are considered more alternative. We also can learn homeopathy, things like craniosacral therapy, or, manipulative type therapies, like what a chiropractor would do. So we have a really big toolkit that kind of pulls from all these different modalities that can range, again, from conventional to like really out there, depending on your worldview. Like homeopathy to some is like really woo-woo, and so that we kind of learn the gamut of things. Functional medicine is similar in kind of I would say the philosophy of a naturopathic doctor is that the body can heal itself. And so disease, illness, anything that is so-called like malfunctioning in the body, or, any symptom, anything that feels wrong or off, is not a sign that the body is broken or breaking. It's a sign that something in the self-healing mechanism has been sort of thwarted or is blocked, or there's something something getting in the way of the body, basically maintaining homeostasis and a baseline in the system. And so our goal as a naturopath is to figure out what is that blockage and how do we work to heal that and remove that, versus maybe a more conventional approach, which would be like, just get rid of the symptom, suppress the symptom. It's kind of working more on the surface, whereas naturopathic medicine is, supposed to be rooted more in finding this root cause. And I think functional medicine is similar in that way. So there's some overlap there. Excuse me. So I think that the difference between functional integrative type providers is maybe just the modalities we use, like herbal medicine, etc. And so naturopathic doctors can really vary in the modalities they use and the approach they take. And again, depending on this, like especially here in the United States, some states don't regulate the term. So someone could call themselves a naturopath and they got like a weekend certificate, which is a problem. And that's a big, thing here in our country that we're kind of like grappling with to get more regulation around that. But a naturopathic doctor or physician is classically someone who went to medical school and got that kind of training.
And what made you want to pursue the naturopathic line of medicine?
Yeah, so that ties into my own health journey. So I was diagnosed with Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune condition, in my 20s, early 20s, and I had no prior, like I grew up in the conventional medical system, going to like my regular kind of general practitioner, and the world of pharmaceuticals, all that sort of stuff. My family was not very oriented toward like holistic alternative medicine. When I got sick, that's when I started to question, is this it? Like, is this my only option? Because I was, like I said, in my early 20s, and the option provided to me was essentially, you're going to be on medicine for the rest of your life. You're probably going to have surgery. Like this trajectory was sort of laid out for me where I was like, that sounds terrible and I don't want this. And so I started to slowly but surely just pursue what else is there. And so I started studying nutrition, through it's kind of like one piece led to another. Like as I was studying nutrition, then I started to learn about herbal medicine. And then as I was studying herbal medicine, that's when like I learned that naturopathic medicine was a thing. And so I decided to go all the way, just because my interest in like what was going on in my body made me want to like basically learn as much as I could, so that I could figure out how to heal myself. And then recognizing as I was doing this work, like that was my interest. Like I was really interested in, okay, this is really fascinating for myself, and now I want to give this to other people too. So it just made sense to kind of go all the way and keep going, like keep figuring out what these layers are to why I was sick and how I could heal.
Amazing. And when you were on that journey and you were going through those layers, I'm going to presume that, you found things that worked and you kept them and you stuck with them, and you probably found things that didn't work and you let them go. Are you able to give listeners here an idea of kind of the main things that you found that have helped you, that you've then been able to go on and share with your people, versus the things that, you thought might have worked, or that we might hear about kind of being I'm thinking of buzzwords being bandied around, that kind of thing. We love a buzzword, things that,
Yes.
that maybe didn't work or did work. I don't want to sound biased, but yeah, tell me your journey in that respect.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So the reason I started with nutrition was because Crohn's disease, for people who don't know, is an autoimmune disease of the digestive system. And so I asked my doctor, he gave me these heavy hitting pharmaceuticals, and then essentially was like, that's it. And I was like, well, what should I eat? Because it's my gut. Like as a 20-year-old, I'm sort of impressed that I had that wherewithal to ask that question. And his response was, don't worry about it. It doesn't matter. Just take your medicine. And I think that for me was like the little like beginning light bulb where I was like, that doesn't make sense. Like it's my gut, like what I'm putting into it seems like it should matter. So that's why I started studying nutrition. The nutrition degree I got it wasn't like a really full, complete degree. So it was sort of like teaching me about like basic nutrition and like, what nutrients we needed and like, kind of those ratios. But that sort of information wasn't helpful for me in terms of like, okay, get this much protein and get these nutrients. Like that wasn't the answer for me in particular. And so the nutrition piece actually fell into place later, actually, when I was studying naturopathic medicine. And, naturopaths are sort of classically always talking about food allergies and food sensitivities and all that sort of thing. I have mixed feelings about it because as someone who I used to practice really traditionally, like do traditional naturopathic medicine, like I would do all the labs and prescribe things and, do that kind of work. I'm completely specialized in mind body medicine now. So I don't do any of that stuff anymore. Part of the reason I don't do that stuff anymore is because I would do things like food allergy testing, and it would essentially just create a lot of food fear and make people really like it would make their world really small in terms of what they could eat, and it would make them really afraid of food because if you see something positive on a test like you're allergic to grapes or whatever, then they're afraid of it, right? They don't want to eat it anymore because then they have this connection of like grapes make me sick. And so I say that, and then also I was tested positive for an allergy to yeast, baker's yeast and brewer's yeast, which is like in so many things, obviously alcohol, bread, like those sorts of things. That actually was phenomenally like life-changing for me to get that out of my diet, and continues to be a huge trigger for me. So if I eat anything with yeast in it, I can immediately feel sort of like inflamed and, just like I can tell it's not sitting well in my system. So it's really tricky because on the one hand, like yeast was, again, life-changing for me. I needed that test. I needed to see that was an allergy. I needed to get that out of my diet. There was other foods I tested positive for, though, like strawberries and eggs and, kind of more classical, well, strawberries isn't really classical, but like more typical allergies I tested positive for. And now I can eat them without problem. So I actually had to kind of heal my relationship with food because of a lot of that testing I do. So it's complicated, right? So like with the food piece, the nutrition piece, I think it's very crucial. And a lot of your listeners I know will know that and be dialed into that. And I think it's about finding the pieces that are like a true blue allergy, like really impactful on your system, versus the ones that maybe are just like not agreeing with your system in the moment and can feel good to take them out. But then eventually like getting them back in or just healing that food fear is really crucial, I think, as part of a healing journey. So that one's complicated. I studied herbal medicine, though there was a lot of things with herbal medicine that were helpful in terms of like bringing my symptoms down. But so they kind of acted more as like a pharmaceutical in that sense, where it was like, I would take something for bloating and gas or, like discomfort or pain in my gut, and it would alleviate that symptom, or something for energy or something for mood or whatever. And those things would help, but none of them were getting at the core of why I was sick. So that's what came later in my journey. I was kind of finding all these pieces that were like alleviating symptoms, but the second I took it away, the symptoms would come back, right? And so some of the herbs helped, the nutrition piece helped. The thing that was really like what I was kind of building toward, I think, in all of my studies was getting to mind body medicine and understanding that there was this deeper mind body nervous system connection going on in my illness. And it wasn't until I started to look at that thing, I found kind of like the more permanent like root of why I was sick.
This all lands with me so well. I've personally, in my own journey with MEN1, have been on quite a similar experience, particularly around food, intolerances, allergies. You mentioned an expression, food fear, which I haven't heard anyone else use, but actually, as soon as you said it, I was like, yeah, that kind of lands with me, definitely. It's a really interesting one to navigate because when you have the head knowledge that, okay, this is something that my body isn't liking, but then actually in the process of applying whatever diet or exclusion or this, that, or the other we think is going to help us, when that in and of itself creates stress and anxiety and we're having the opposite effect, it can be so difficult to navigate. And I think that this like portion so far of our episode is going to land so well with a lot of MEN1 patients who are, yes, probably kind of tuned in on, you know, gut health. And I think a lot of people now are beginning to understand that this is such a crucial part of health, but actually, you know, that it can be taken to an extreme, and when it, you know, creates the fear that it, in and of itself, is the thing we're trying to heal in the first place. So thank you for mentioning that. And I kind of wanted to, I guess, take a thread with this particular topic and run with it, because I know a lot of what you do with your kind of patients, your clients, is to help them heal their fear. And I'm gonna use the word fear, but I think other people might want to say stress, or they might want to say trauma. Can you explain how that fits into the body of work that you do? And I know that you have a framework which has helped you with your healing that you then share with other people. Where does kind of emotional health fit into that? How might it help someone in a way that they're not yet aware of?
Yeah, that's such a great question. So, I mean, I think even the food piece is a great example of that, where like the food fear is a mind-body connection, right? Because you're connecting something you're cognitively seeing, which is the food, and you have this correlation of like, that makes me sick, and then it creates this reaction in your system. And so that, you know, that's a direct, like, okay, I think something, I believe something, and then there's an impact on my system. So, you know, the mind-body connection, the emotional connection, our nervous system is wired to everything in our whole body, right? It touches every organ system, every cell. It's the computer system, you know, to say it in sort of like unflattering terms, like that runs who we are. And so the nervous system is the brain, and then it's the spinal cord and all of the nerves that emanate from that. And there's different functions of the nervous system, but to break it down into really kind of basic building block terms, we have our kind of what we call the rest and digest side of things. This is like the relaxed, kind of calm, grounded side of our nervous system. This is the state in which our body is able to, as it sounds like, relax, digest food. So if we're not in that state, our body, like our digestive system, doesn't really work all that well. It's where we can heal. It's where cells turn over and regenerate and replenish. So this rest and digest state is the state we need to be in order for our body to do what it needs to do to heal and to be in a state of baseline. When we get stressed, or when we face fear, or we get triggered, or whatever, you know, something kind of stressful or you know, to the like higher end traumatic is happening, our nervous system switches over into what we call fight or flight. And I'm sure everyone's heard of that by now. It's, you know, well known what this is, but so it's fight, flight, freeze, fawn is kind of like how our system can shift into one of these different states. And what's happening when we shift into that state is our system is getting us ready to literally fight the threat, run away from it, which is flight. Freeze is when we think we can't like win, we can't fight it, we can't get away from it. So we like, it's like a shutdown mechanism. And then fawning is this newer response that we're learning about, which is essentially people pleasing, where we try to like appease the threat and make it happy and do what it needs in order for the threat to go away. So our nervous system is literally like the different nerves and the different neurochemicals, like everything that the nervous system is doing switches when we switch into that state of fight or flight. And in that state, whether we're in fight, flight, freeze, or fawn, our body can't heal. The healing mechanisms are on pause. Our digestive system, as I mentioned, shuts down because it's like, you need to focus on surviving this threat. We will eat the cheeseburger later. Like, let's not worry about that right now. Like, you need to survive. So digestive system shuts down. Our immune system, which is pertinent to us autoimmune folks, it becomes altered, right? The immune system functions differently. Literally every body system shifts into a state of like, what do we need to do to help you survive and get away from this threat? And then once the threat is gone, we'll come back into rest and digest. We'll get back to healing and healthy baseline, etc. The problem is that, first of all, for those of us who experience trauma, that's the nature of trauma, is that it's shifting us into the state of fight or flight, and we're not usually coming out of it, or we are more often than not in a state of fight or flight because our traumatic experience has essentially programmed our nervous system to be on high alert, like much more high alert than it would otherwise. The other reality is that we live in, I mean, like, look at the world right now, right? Like, the news is traumatizing, like, we're in traffic all the time, like, people are just contentious. I mean, I don't know how it is where you are, but my country is having a bit of a problem. And so we just, like there's just constant bombardment of stress, right? Like our kind of normal, quote unquote, normal life is not really conducive for relaxation and calm and healing and regeneration. Like, we work all the time, and like there's just so much stress. And so I think even regardless of traumatic experiences or not, our nervous systems are more often than not shifting into this state of survival, essentially. And that is not a state in which healing can occur. And so, we're kind of constantly inundating ourselves in cortisol and all these stress hormones and stress chemicals, and our body is just physiologically not in a state in which healing can occur. And so chronically, long-term, over time, that's going to change how our body functions, right? And so, like, speaking about autoimmunity, like if our immune system is chronically shifted into this different state, like it just kind of starts to malfunction, so to speak. Like, you can't like drive a car without putting oil in it. It's going to start to break down. You have to like maintain it and let it rest and refill the fluids and all the things. So that's the way I talk about how and why chronic illness has this really important mind-body connection that we need to be looking at. Because, kind of speaking again to my experience, like if I changed my diet, if I took herbs, if I did these things, it would kind of calm down my symptoms. But the second I took them away, the symptoms came back. And so that is because the nervous system that is sort of running the whole body is still there, basically telling my body to be in survival mode, right? It's still changing my digestive system, how it's functioning. It's still changing how my immune system is functioning. And so until I got into my nervous system and started to calm it down and reprogram it and help it shift out of survival, everything else was just kind of a band-aid, right? It was just kind of calming down this result of my nervous system being in this overdrive state. And so that's why I think of this nervous system, mind-body piece as so foundational and crucial, and yet is so often just like not considered when we're looking at like the cause of illness. Sacred Illness listeners, Dr. Erin here. If you're feeling inspired by the stories you're hearing in this podcast and you feel this inner nudge or pull of, I want to walk this kind of journey, or I want to learn the things that they're learning, or maybe you've been walking a similar path and you're thinking, I want to get past feeling stuck or lost or confused in my healing journey. When you're hearing these stories, you're seeing what's possible. You're hearing how people are moving through their illnesses to find deep purpose and meaning in their illness itself and also in their lives. And so if you are in that place of feeling inspired and ready to take your own healing to the next level, this is exactly what I created the Sacred Illness membership for. This membership is for people who are either completely new to this kind of healing work or have been doing it for a while and need more guidance and clarity for how to move through when they get stuck or when certain limiting beliefs come up or when they hit certain walls. This is a roadmap that's going to take you from point A to point Z with the clarity, the mindset, the energetics, and everything in between that you need to successfully walk the healing path. So what is this membership all about? It's not just another healing space that's all about random tools for relaxing your nervous system or repeating mantras that calm you down in the moment. Instead, the Sacred Illness membership is a step-by-step process that is going to teach you, why is your illness here? What is it asking of you? And what do you need to do about it? At the core of the membership is the Sacred Illness Blueprint. This takes you through what I call the hero's healing journey. Every stage of the healing journey is different, and the mindset, the energy, the tools needed are all different. And so the blueprint is walking you through each one of those steps, helping you understand where you are, why you're there, what to expect, and what to do to get through to the other side. So you never find yourself in that space again of, why am I sick? Why is nothing helping? Am I just going to be sick forever? It is really the core of the journey, and it is what is going to anchor you into your healing work time and time again. Every time you log in, it's going to tell you exactly where you're at and what you should be working on and how you're going to navigate the current phase of healing that you're in. In addition to the blueprint, we have the powerful Rewire Your Reality daily practice. This is something that we've offered as a standalone challenge, but it's also a core integrative piece of the membership itself. The healing journey at its core is about identifying how is my nervous system wired for survival versus wired for healing. The daily practice helps you really identify what are the ways in which my nervous system has patterns and beliefs and behaviors that are happening automatically without me knowing, that are creating conditions for illness that are showing up in my daily life. It's teaching you to identify those patterns and to rewire them in order to literally and physiologically shift your body into a place in which healing can actually occur. So those two things are really the core of the membership. But as you move through the blueprint, you continue to unlock what I like to call side quests. So if we think of the healing journey as sort of the main quest, we're trying to get to this root of why am I sick, what's the message, and what do I do about it? As you move through the blueprint, you get to unlock these other opportunities that will take you deeper into certain aspects of healing. So if, for example, you struggle with your relationship with food and eating and movement, there is an intuitive eating course that you can take that will guide you through the entire intuitive eating process. It will help you learn how and where and when you lost connection to your innate intuitive eater, how to reclaim that relationship and therefore heal your relationship with food. If you feel like you're someone who is constantly failing the healing journey or not getting the results that you want, or not feeling like you're able to take what you're learning and apply it in an embodied, living way, we have a course called Receiving Mode. And this is a really important side quest that you can go on off of the main blueprint journey that really teaches you the art of the healing journey, how to be in this place of action and also receiving. Because we can all get so stuck in this place of, I need to do more, I need to learn more, I need to see another doctor, I need to try another protocol. And we can get so in our head about it that we're missing the embodied reality that is healing, that we have to actually walk the talk. We have to practice what we preach. We have to be the person that we're trying to become. And so this course helps to teach what that feels like and how to shift into that space and that balance of doing and receiving so that we can actually reap the benefits of the work that we're doing. And if you are someone who's on a healing journey and you are also a healer, or you aspire to be in the healing profession at some point in your life, we have a course called the Wounded Healers course. This is a personal favorite of mine because as someone who is a wounded healer, I know how much we can have imposter syndrome at times or all the time in our work. We can feel like, who am I to help others when I myself still have symptoms and still struggle with health? This is the message of this work, that our illness is not a burden and not a barrier to being a healer, but is actually the invitation to step more deeply into this healing work. Through the work you do in the blueprint and inside your membership, you will learn with more and more clarity that your illness itself is actually the invitation to step more deeply into your purpose, to transform your suffering into your greatest gift, which is the gift that you give to others, to help them alchemize their pain, to understand their suffering, to see how the ways in which we are challenged in this life is an invitation to step more deeply into a space of meaning and into a space of health and well-being, and not the opposite. So this Wounded Healers course is really a way of passing on the sacred illness tradition to you that you can then pass on to your clients. And in this way, we send out these ripple effects throughout the world that really reinforces this new paradigm that illness is a sacred invitation to come back home to yourself. So this membership isn't about getting rid of your symptoms and suppressing them. It's about really learning how to connect to your body as a sacred guide, how to learn how to listen to what it's saying to you, how to be in a deep relationship with it, one of trust and one of reverence, understanding that your body is so wise and it contains everything that you need to heal yourself, to tap into your innate healing capacity, and more than anything else, to reconnect back to who you really are and who you were before life and trauma got in the way of that. So in addition to all of these incredible courses and the roadmap that will guide you step by step by step through the healing journey, ensuring your success, we have incredible support. There is a community forum where you can connect to the other members inside this space and find folks who are walking a similar journey to you. We also have monthly tea times where community members get together and can chat live through Zoom if you would like to meet face to face. We also have a whole healing resources library. So this is another entire resource for you to access for additional support like EFT tapping scripts or guided meditations, guided self-hypnosis tracks. We also have live monthly somatic yoga classes, and these are for folks who really want to get back into your body and have a more embodied approach to this work. They are taught every month by the incredible Diana May, who is a somatic informed yoga instructor, and all the recorded courses go into that healing resources library for reference if you can't make it to the live class. And And one of our newest additions to the membership is a Q&A library. So as you're moving through the courses, you will have the opportunity to submit questions, and I will answer them live through video or through voice recording that is essentially giving you one-on-one coaching in this asynchronous way. The library of Q&A questions is going to be an ever-growing resource so that wherever you are in the healing journey, you can check in, see what questions people are asking about that particular part of the journey. You can learn from their experiences, feel validated in the fact that you're having similar questions or challenges, and you can help others by your questions, and they can learn from you and your process as well. From time to time, we have guest lecturers come in and teach workshops from anything ranging from astrology to somatic work and everything in between. And these just help us get a different perspective and be inspired about all the different ways in which healing can take place and all the different modalities that are out there. And twice a year, we have community-wide challenges. So this is a way in which we all come together and do the work together in a concerted way. These challenges serve to infuse a little more energy and excitement into the journey that you're currently on, or to just deepen and enrich your current process. So if you're ready to take the leap and join us inside the membership, click the link below in the show notes. As a thank you for being here, podcast listeners get 20% off your first month of the membership by using the coupon code PODCAST, all caps, PODCAST. I can't wait to see you inside the membership. I can't wait to support you on this next leg of your healing journey. And until then, let's get back to the podcast.
It's really, really interesting. And I love that you talk about the nervous system and how this interacts with the rest of the body, because I know from my experience, it wasn't until I branched out of conventional traditional medicine into more alternative kind of paths. And even then, we're talking like getting like way out of like functional medicine. We're talking the wacky, the woo-woo healing. Like that's when I first really understood about the nervous system and its interaction with the rest of the systems in the body. And, learning that actually, I think as you kind of explained with things like diet and all of that being like a band-aid, when actually the nervous system is in its fight or flight response the whole time. I know I had a similar experience. I was taking supplements and all of this, and actually all I know is that like when I'm stressed, like none of that is making a difference. It really, really isn't. So I'm really glad that you've explained that, and it certainly like landed with me. It made me want to ask you a question, and maybe this kind of relates to your experience as well. I think with illness, particularly when it's something like Crohn's or MEN1, where there's a little more reticence to look at it as a condition that's just brought on by being unhealthy, because actually it can happen to seemingly very, very healthy people. And in MEN1, there's a strong kind of like genetic factor. It can feel as though our body is working against us, if that makes sense. And so it's almost like, well, what's the point? Because actually it's just programmed to like not help me out. There's no point doing anything. Do you work with people who have like that kind of approach? And did you ever feel that yourself, where you're like, you know what, like I can't do anything because like I can't win?
Totally. Yes. I love this question because this is the heart and soul of my work essentially. So when I first got sick, yeah, I mean, it to me felt like it ruined my life. And I apologize for my throat. I'm getting over pneumonia, so I'm like hacking and coughing over here. So I was 20, 21. I couldn't go to college. I couldn't hang out with my friends. I was very, very anemic, so I had to stay in bed. I could barely, if I ate something, it immediately went through me. I just was in pain, what 20-year-old is getting a colonoscopy and taking several medications and like laying in bed. I just felt like my life as I knew it was over. And as I said, I had been given this trajectory of like, yeah, this is like the best we have to offer you is these pills, and then you're going to have surgery. Like, it was just like, it's not really going to get better was kind of the message I was given. And so at that time, if someone said to me at that time what I say to people now, which is that like illness is happening for a reason, and all this, which I'll get into, I probably would have like been very mad at them, I would have been like offended, because I was like, this is ruining my life. How are you telling me that there's some like beautiful meaning and purpose in this? But that was, I think, so in retrospect, I can now see my illness took me out of life, which it tends to, right? Like illness tends to take us out of life. It creates a barrier for us to engage in life in the way we used to in some way, like to varying degrees. Some of us are completely out like I was. Like I couldn't do anything. Some of us have like some things we can't do as well. Like I have a podcast that I was just talking to somebody where he was a bicyclist and he like couldn't get on his bike because of his illness. You know, he could do other things, but he couldn't do this one thing he really loved. So, you know, there's varying degrees to which illness gets in the way of life. And now, again, in retrospect, I can see that that was the point, because the way I was living my life up to that point, I was raised by a people pleaser and a narcissist. So I had this dynamic modeled for me of like, your needs don't matter. So it's like the fawn response that I was sort of like constantly in, like make everyone else happy, you know, keep everyone happy, keep the anger away, like, you know, but kind of appease the narcissistic parent, make sure that they're, you know, make sure they're happy so that nothing scary or harmful happens. So my nervous system was like from day zero, from moment zero, just primed in this environment in which I was told like, you know, the world isn't safe unless the people around you are happy, and it's your job to do that. And so everything in my life was reflecting that, like the relationships I had, the friendships I had, the way I was showing up to life was just this constant, like, who do I need to be to make everyone happy? How do I need to show up in the world to keep it safe? And, you know, I like wasn't myself, you know, I didn't really know who I was. I was going to school, the school that my sister went to, like, I was just kind of like doing what other people did because I thought that that's what it meant to be a person, right? Was to just like do what everyone wanted. And so when I got sick, I couldn't do any of it anymore, right? It took me out of that life and it forced me into bed, and I like had to just like, I said, I couldn't like do the normal things. And I felt very different from everyone else in my life. And it put me on this different path that I probably wouldn't have been on otherwise, where then I started to study health related things, right? Nutrition, herbal medicine, all the way to where I am today. And it was because of that illness and that journey that I started to recognize, like, I'm not living my life like for me, you know, like I don't even know who I am. Like I'm who everyone else needs me to be. I'm behaving in this way that is completely ignoring what, like, I would have these like feelings in my body that would feel uncomfortable, where I'd say yes when I really wanted to say no, or I didn't want to do something, but I would force myself to do it anyway, because again, I was just so in this mode of like, that's what you have to do to be safe and to survive. And so I was ignoring these inner sort of like discomforts in my body because I didn't know I didn't feel safe doing anything else. And so it's almost as if the illness was this huge, like this finally like big internal message in my system that was like, okay, if you're not going to stop, we're going to stop you, because this is not sustainable. This is not why you're here. I mean, to even take it a point further, like it's almost as if that the illness like had to happen. It all had to happen in this way so that I could learn what I learn in order to teach other people. That's kind of how I see it now. So I got to that point of recognizing, yeah, just like my childhood trauma, the way I was showing up in the world, like how I was so off track of who I really am and how misaligned I was with what is like true for me. Basically worked really, you know, did lots and lots of therapy, lots of trauma work, lots of intensive psychotherapy type stuff to like deprogram all of that and to really start to get into line with who I really am. And that is when my symptoms started to go away. And at this point, I consider myself in remission. I haven't had, you know, I have, like I said, if I eat yeast or if I do these, you know, if I get stressed, like I'll have these little like twinges, but full-blown Crohn's disease I have not had for like a decade at this point. And as I said, it was when I was doing that intensive, like getting rid of the fake self, the false self, and really stepping into like, who am I really? What do I really want? That's like, it was almost like the symptoms, I like forgot that I was even sick because they just sort of naturally stopped existing in my life. And so that's where I recognized every time I was engaging in those behaviors that were not me, like when I was people pleasing and saying yes when I meant no, and all of those kinds of ways in which I was programmed by my traumatic experiences to show up in the world, that behavior, those behaviors, those thoughts, those feelings, that ignoring of myself was sending this signal to my nervous system: you're not safe, you're not safe, you're not safe. That's why you're behaving this way, because if you were safe, you wouldn't be pretending to be somebody else. Essentially, you would be living your life. And so every time I showed up in that way and I sent that signal to my nervous system, it kept my body in survival mode. And as soon as I started to step into and behave in ways that were more aligned with who I am, my nervous system was like, oh, okay, you must be safe now because you're actually like living, you know, your truth. You're speaking your truth. You're showing up in this way that It feels authentic. You're not ignoring yourself. You're not pushing yourself beyond what feels comfortable and good to you. Like there's this like resonance we have, right? Like, you know, and you might call it soul. I don't know. It's your innate self, right? And it has a certain resonance to it. And you can feel when you're, you know, I think we all have that awareness of that discomfort of when we're kind of pushing ourselves like outside our boundaries or just not living. We're not happy, we're depressed, we're tired. Like there's just a feeling of when we're off track. And when we start to like match up with it again and get in line with it again, that's when the nervous system is like, okay, you're safe, because it's only when we feel really safe and secure that we can show up in that way. And it takes a lot of that work to peel back those layers and those programs of like, how did we get programmed to not be that person? How were we told that that person wasn't okay or wasn't safe or isn't acceptable? And what are these layers and these masks that we put on because of it that we need to then kind of like deprogram to release? So at this point, my framework, it's called sacred illness, because I think of illness as this sacred invitation to basically examine like, how am I off track? How am I not in alignment with myself? How am I not in resonance with my, again, soul, higher self, whatever you want to call it? Because if I was in alignment, my nervous system wouldn't be in this survival mode that is then creating the conditions in which illness occurs. And that is, I think, the invitation that illness presents to us is, excuse me, to examine that. Like, where am I off track? When did that happen? Most of it's not our fault. A lot of it is cultural and familial programming, traumatic experiences, etc. Like, we didn't ask for any of that, right? But it becomes our work through this invitation of illness to begin to examine what is that program that's running in my system that's telling me that I'm not safe, and how do I begin to deprogram that and step into alignment with what I really need to heal. And sometimes that can mean, you know, really changing our lives and our relationships. Like the people and the things I used to do are completely not who or what I do now, right? Like it was a complete revolution of my life. So it can be hard work. But that's the journey I went on. And that was ultimately, again, what kind of led to my symptoms alleviating and healing, was getting into alignment in that way.
I think it's amazing that you're able to express with such clarity and context from your own experience with illness, like how emotional unease within yourself from childhood that you then carried forward through, like how that then manifested physically in your body. And I know to anyone who's listening to a conversation like this for the first time, it's going to sound completely out there. Like,
Yes.
you might be thinking, like, what are these two taking? This is so weird. But I have to say, from my own experience, like when I first had that told to me, initially there was some resistance. I was like, no, this is one of the like 1 to 3% of genetic diseases that like has nothing to do with, you know, the way I live my life or anything. Like I was born with this, you know, I have not like no responsibility in this. And I think staying within this space and actually realizing how empowering it was to understand that I had some control. And for anyone who's listening and not watching, I put control in inverted commas just because, you know, that is such a kind of a difficult word to use when it comes to disease. And it was going to lead me on to my final question, Dr. Erin, for you, which is, in the instance of someone, you know, with MEN1 or Crohn's or whatever it might be, you know, and they really feel like, yeah, their body's working against them. They don't feel like they can really kind of trust their body, if that makes sense. Are there any kind of really tangible practices or things other than those you've mentioned? I know you've talked about you know, things like we've talked about diet, nutrition, and that sort of thing. But from a kind of nervous system point of view, is there anything that you share with your clients, whether it's like a kind of daily habit or anything like that, that someone could take away from this episode and know that actually they're going to have just that tiny little bit more control when they're able to practice this this little act or habit, as they say?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think, first of all, totally echoing what you said, like, I know this is a big pill to swallow for people who are new to this sort of mentality. And so I just want to validate that and say, like, that is like I said, if someone said this to me when I was sick, and kind of still in my like more conventional medicine mindset, or just not exposed to like different ideas or whatever, I would have been offended, honestly. Like I would have been like, this is ruining my life. How dare you tell me this stuff? So if you're having that kind of reaction, just know that that's understandable, because it is hard to think of this in any terms other than as a threat. And that leads me into kind of the thing that I would encourage you all to try if you're new to this, or even if you're open to these ideas. One of the really important things that we can do with our symptoms is to begin to reframe them as not a threat, because we can get into this situation where, first of all, we're living our life, right? And then we get sick, and then the sickness itself can become a stressor, obviously, right? Like symptoms are stressors. They can feel scary. Like we can have these thoughts and feelings of like, oh my gosh, like what does this mean, or where is this leading, or what's the next symptom that's going to happen. Like we just start to develop this kind of adversarial relationship with our body, where it's like, my body's failing me, I don't trust it. And that can kind of push us further. It almost becomes like a self-perpetuating vicious cycle at that point, because we're creating a stress response in our body in response to our body, and it just kind of goes and goes and goes. And so I would encourage folks to begin to just get curious, right? I think curiosity is a really helpful word, because it doesn't have to mean like liking it or hating it. It's just this sort of neutral, like, can we just start to get curious about our symptoms? And there's a tool or technique called somatic tracking, where somatic being like body, and tracking is like, you're just kind of tracking what the body is doing. So you essentially, like if you're having a symptom, like let's say you're having abdominal pain or something, if you can just close your eyes and tune into that sensation in your system. And what I always encourage folks to do is like, see if you can just find the boundaries of it. Like, how tall is it? How deep is it? How wide is it? Like, where is it taking up space in your system? Give it a color. Like, is it red? Does it seem red? Or, does it feel black? Or maybe there's no color. There doesn't have to be. Does it feel heavy? Like, how would you describe it? Is it burning? Is it itchy? Is it ticklish? Like, is it whatever, right? Like, just kind of describe how it feels in your system. And then you just sit with it for a moment. And so you're just kind of feeling that sensation. You're feeling that shape. You're feeling where it takes up space in your system. You're feeling the sensation of that symptom. And really what you're trying to do is shift this mentality from like, it's a symptom and it means this, and like the fear that can start to build off of that, and just shift into experiencing it purely as a sensation. Like, okay, there's this heavy sensation in my gut. And you just sit with it and see if you can give it permission to do what it wants to do. Like, it's like, again, that curiosity of like, if I just sit with it and watch it, kind of like I'm watching TV, can I just be this neutral observer where my body is the container of this symptom? Can I just watch it and see what happens next? And as you're sitting with it and watching it, and if you start to find that it's like moving or growing or shifting, or like changing locations or shrinking, as you're like sitting with it and breathing with it and trying to like, I use this phrase like relax around it, so like usually when we have a symptom, we're like, oh, like we tense around it, or we get stressed, or we kind of like, our body can start to shut down around it. If we can relax around it and give it permission to move, and then if it does move, if it does change, allow that change that you're feeling in your body to be some sort of signal to you that it's not at least 100% physical. Because if it was 100% physical, it would stay exactly where it was. It wouldn't change locations. It wouldn't change at all. It would just be right there in your system, right? But if you start to experience it like moving or growing, or if emotions start to come up, or sometimes people have like memories pop up when they do this work, this is like somatic work 101. It's starting to give you clues of like, there's some emotion attached to this, or there's some memories attached to this, or if it's moving, then there's something else going on here that's not just physical. And I want that to just see how that can allow you to maybe crack a little bit into this mindset of like, it's physical and it's harmful and it's, my body's failing me, and try to see it as like, it's this communication. It's this thing that's holding something. It's holding information. There's maybe more here than meets the eye. And if I just sit with it and allow it to move around in my system, like if I get curious about it, like what happens next, basically, like if I just ask that question, like what happens next? What do I notice if I just sit with it in this more neutral way? That's how we begin to open up communication with our system, and we start to understand, or at least just like have a different relationship with it. And the idea of somatic tracking is, as we're like tracking and feeling this sensation in our body, it starts to take away some of that fear of like, okay, it's not just destroying my body. It's not just like my body failing me. Like it just feels, you can just get a sense of like, there's maybe something more to this. And what happens if I start to be curious versus like shutting it down, fighting against it, closing it off? I'll just leave it with this, where the body symptoms, like if we start to think of like the body and symptoms as trying to get our attention, if they're trying to get our attention, if we're willing to switch into that mindset, what happens if we just, even in the slightest bit, get a little bit curious and a little bit willing to just be with it, allow it to be there and see what happens next. And anything that starts to come up can start to give you that information of like, okay, maybe there's something more here. And then, we can kind of take it from there in terms of like how we explore it or sit with it. But that's a kind of a basic exercise that we can do to start to open that door into this like other world, essentially.
I really love that. And particularly what you said about trying not to see the symptom as purely physical, but like emotional as well, because if it were physical, then it would change. It wouldn't change. It would stay exactly the same. And that's for me, that's blown my mind. Really, it has. And I all I know is that anyone listening back to this is probably going to feel the same now, because to see symptoms and to see illness, disease in such a different light is so refreshing. I know that from my own experience. I know that from what listeners have told me, and I am certainly very grateful for the time that you've so generously given to this podcast, to this episode. And I want to thank you and just say, all the best with all the work that you are doing. It's absolutely incredible. You really are helping like shift, paradigms completely with, medicine and also personally as well, the emotional journey, which we talked about as being really, really part of disease, of illness. And I'm very, very grateful for your time. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Lizzie. It's been such a pleasure. I could talk about this all day, so I appreciate the opportunity.
Likewise. And I'm hopefully we'll have you back on at some point in the future too.
Yes, please. I'd be happy to. Thanks so much for tuning in to another episode of the Sacred Illness Podcast. If you find this information shared here inspirational and educational, please share it with those you think would benefit from this work. To take this work deeper yourself, check out our website, www.aurorasomatic.com, where you can explore our coaching, community, and course options. And don't forget to subscribe to this channel, where new content is coming out all the time, intended to inspire, awaken, and help you deepen your relationship with yourself, your life, and your world. We'll see you next time.